In 1998, Michael Jordan walked into a meeting with rich investors in Chicago. A wealthy white man named Harold Pemberton stood up and said something that shocked the room. Black athletes should just play ball and leave the thinking to people like us. Everyone stared at Jordan, waiting to see what he would do. His response made history and changed thousands of lives forever. But here's the secret nobody knew. The man who said those words would become Jordan's best friend in the most shocking transformation ever. What did Jordan say that made headlines around the world? And how did his biggest enemy become his closest ally? Michael Jordan walked through the tall glass doors of the Palmer Club in Chicago. His shoes made soft sounds on the marble floor. The walls were covered with expensive paintings of old white men in fancy clothes. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling like frozen stars. He had been to many important places before, but this felt different. This felt like walking into someone else's world. Mr. Jordan, a man in a black suit hurried over. Welcome to the Palmer Club. The investors are waiting for you in the Golden Room. Jordan followed the man down a long hallway. The carpet was so thick his feet sank into it with each step. Everything around him cost more money than most people made in a year. He thought about his father, who had worked hard all his life, but never saw places like this. His dad would have laughed at the fancy carpet and shiny walls. Son, he would have said, money can buy you gold, but it can't buy you a golden heart. The Golden Room was at the end of the hall. When Jordan stepped inside, he understood why it had that name. The walls were painted gold. The chairs were covered in gold fabric. Even the picture frames were made of gold. 20 men sat around a huge wooden table. They all wore expensive suits and shiny watches. Some had gray hair. Others had no hair at all. But they all had the same look in their eyes, the look of people who were used to getting what they wanted. Gentlemen, said the man in the black suit, I present Michael Jordan. The room went quiet. All 20 men turned to look at him. Jordan felt their eyes studying him like he was a puzzle they needed to solve. Michael, a short, round man jumped up from his chair. I'm Richard Goldstein. We've been waiting for you. Jordan shook his hand. Goldstein's palm was soft and sweaty. Jordan's hand was rough from years of holding basketballs. Please, sit here. Goldstein pointed to a chair at the head of the table. We have so much to discuss. Jordan sat down. The chair was more comfortable than his couch at home. He looked around the table at the faces watching him. Some smiled. Others just stared. A few whispered to each other. We're here to talk about your idea, said Goldstein. The Youth Basketball League. We think it could make a lot of money. It's not about money, Jordan said quietly. It's about giving kids a chance to play and learn. An older man with white hair laughed. Everything is about money, Michael. That's how the world works. Jordan felt his jaw tighten. These men saw dollar signs where he saw dreams. They saw profit where he saw possibility. Tell us more about these. Kids, said a thin man with glasses. What kind of kids are we talking about? All kinds, Jordan answered. Kids from the city. Kids from small towns. Kids who love basketball and want to get better. But mostly black kids, right? The question came from a tall man at the far end of the table. He had cold blue eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. Jordan paused. Kids are kids. Color doesn't matter when you're playing ball. Of course, said the tall man. I'm Harold Pemberton III, by the way. I own several companies here in Chicago. Jordan had heard of Pemberton. He owned factories and stores all over the city. People said he was very rich and very powerful. They also said he was not very nice. The thing is, Pemberton continued, we need to be smart about this. We need to think about what people want to see. The room got quiet again. Jordan felt something cold creep up his back. He had felt this feeling before, but never in a room full of men in expensive suits. I love basketball, said a man with a thick mustache. Been watching it for 40 years. You're the greatest player I've ever seen. Thank you, Jordan said. But you have to admit, the man went on. There's a difference between playing the game and running the business. Running a business takes a different kind of thinking. More men nodded around the table. Jordan felt like he was shrinking in his chair, even though he was 6 feet 6 inches tall. That's exactly right, said Pemberton. His voice was getting louder. Look, I have nothing but respect for what these athletes do on the court. Amazing stuff. Pure talent. He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Chicago stretched out like a concrete jungle. Cars moved like ants between the tall buildings. But let's be honest here, Pemberton said. turning back to face the table. We need to keep things in perspective. These people are entertainers. They're there to make us cheer and have fun. Jordan's hands slowly curled into fists on the table. The gold walls suddenly felt like they were closing in on him. I mean, come on, Pemberton continued. He was looking right at Jordan now. We all know the truth here. Black athletes should just play ball and leave the thinking to people like us. The room went completely silent. Jordan felt his heart start to pound. The blood rushed to his face. Around the table, some men looked down at their papers. Others shifted in their chairs. A few nodded slightly, like they agreed with what Pemberton had said, but nobody spoke up. Nobody said Pemberton was wrong. Jordan thought about his father again. His dad had always taught him to work hard and stay quiet. Keep your head down and do your job, he had said. Don't make waves. But sitting in this golden room, listening to these words, Jordan felt something burning in his chest. It was anger, but it was more than that. It was disappointment. It was hurt. It was the feeling of being small in a room full of people who thought they were big. He looked at Pemberton, who was still smiling his cold smile. He looked at the other men, who were waiting to see what would happen next. That Jordan's father had also taught him something else. Son, he had said, there comes a time when staying quiet becomes the same as agreeing. When that time comes, you have to find your voice. Jordan felt that time was now. Slowly, very slowly, he began to stand up. The chair made a soft scraping sound as Jordan pushed it back. Every eye in the golden room turned to him. The crystal lights above seemed to get brighter. The gold walls seemed to shine. Jordan stood at his full height. 6 feet 6 inches of muscle and determination. His shadow fell across the expensive wooden table. Excuse me. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence like a knife. That Pemberton's smile got wider. I said what we all know to be true, Michael. You're entertainers. You make us happy. You make us cheer. But when it comes to business, to thinking, to making important decisions, he waved his hand in the air. Well, that's what people like us are for. The words hit Jordan like punches to the chest. He had heard whispers like this his whole life. In school hallways, in newspaper articles, even from some fans who cheered for him on the court but didn't think he was smart enough to tie his own shoes. But never like this. Never so bold. Never so cruel. People like you, Jordan asked. Smart people, Pemberton said. Educated people. People who understand how the world really works. Jordan felt his hands shaking. Not from fear, but from anger that was trying to burst out of him like water from a broken dam. He looked around the table at the other men. Some stared at their papers. Others cleaned their glasses. A few nodded like they agreed with every word. Pemberton said, Richard Goldstein, the man who had invited him, wouldn't even look at him. The man with the thick mustache studied his fingernails. The older man with white hair just shrugged. Nobody was going to speak up for him. Nobody was going to say Pemberton was wrong. Jordan thought about his childhood in North Carolina. He remembered being called names on the playground. He remembered teachers who expected him to fail. He remembered coaches who said he wasn't smart enough to learn complicated plays. That he thought about his mother, who had worked 3 jobs to pay for his college. She had always told him, Michael, you're not just strong in your body. You're strong in your mind too. Don't let anyone tell you different. He thought about his teammates at the University of North Carolina. Marcus, who became a doctor. Tony, who became a lawyer. James, who started his own business. All of them told they should just play ball and nothing more. That he thought about Magic Johnson, who built companies and helped his community. He thought about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who wrote books and spoke about important things. He thought about Arthur Ashe, who fought for equal rights and education. All of them told to stay quiet. All of them told to just entertain people and not think for themselves. Jordan felt the anger in his chest growing hotter. But underneath the anger was something else. Something that hurt even more. Disappointment. That he was disappointed in Pemberton for saying such cruel things. He was disappointed in the other men for not speaking up. But most of all, he was disappointed in himself for almost staying quiet. His father had always said, Son, there are 2 kinds of people in this world. Those who speak up when they see something wrong, and those who stay quiet and let the wrong things happen. Jordan had stayed quiet for too long. Mr. Pemberton, he said, his voice getting stronger. Do you know what I was doing before I came here today? Pemberton looked confused. Playing basketball, I assume. I was reading, Jordan said. I was reading about business plans and youth programs. I was reading about how to help kids get better grades while they learn to play ball. Some of the men looked up from their papers. Do you know what I did yesterday? Jordan continued. I visited 3 schools in Chicago. I talked to teachers and principals. I asked them what kids need to succeed. More men were looking at him now. And do you know what I'm going to do tomorrow? Jordan's voice was getting louder. I'm going to visit colleges and talk to professors about creating programs that help young athletes become doctors and lawyers and teachers. The room was completely quiet now. Even Pemberton had stopped smiling. You see, Mr. Pemberton, Jordan said, I don't just play ball. I think. I plan. I dream. And I'm not the only one. Jordan walked around the table slowly. His footsteps echoed. In the Golden Room. Every athlete you've ever cheered for has a brain in their head and a heart in their chest. We're not just entertainers. We're people. We're human beings with ideas and dreams and the ability to change the world. He stopped in front of Pemberton's chair. You want to know what I think? Jordan asked. I think you're scared. I think you're scared that if people like me start thinking and speaking up, people might realize that the color of our skin has nothing to do with what's in our minds. Pemberton's face was getting red. Now you listen here. No, Jordan said, his voice like thunder. You listen. The word hung in the air like lightning. Every man in the room sat perfectly still. Jordan felt something powerful flowing through him. It was the same feeling he got when he was about to make the winning shot in a big game. But this was bigger than any game. This was about something that mattered more than basketball. This was about respect. This was about dignity. This was about the right to be seen as a whole person, not just a pair of hands that could bounce a ball. Jordan took a deep breath. When he spoke again, his voice was calm but strong. I'm going to tell you a story, Mr. Pemberton. A story about people who do more than just play ball. Jordan's voice filled the Golden Room like music. Every man leaned forward to listen. Even Pemberton, who was still standing by the window, turned to face him. My grandfather's name was Samuel. Jordan began. He couldn't read or write. Not one word. But he was the smartest man I ever knew. Jordan walked back to his chair, but didn't sit down. He stood behind it, his hands resting on the gold fabric. Samuel worked on a farm in North Carolina. Every morning before the sun came up, he would walk to the fields. Every night after the sun went down, he would walk home. He did this for 60 years. The room was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. People looked at my grandfather and saw a man who couldn't read. They thought he was stupid. They thought he had nothing important to say. Jordan's eyes found Pemberton's across the room. But I knew better. Samuel taught me about hard work. He taught me about never giving up. He taught me that your worth isn't measured by what you can read in a book, but by what you carry in your heart. Jordan began to walk around the table again, but this time his steps were slow and gentle. When I was 8 years old, I got in trouble at school. I was angry because some kids were calling me names. I wanted to fight them with my fists. He stopped, behind the chair of the man with the thick mustache. My grandfather took me to the old oak tree behind his house. He made me sit there for 2 hours. Just sit and think. When the sun started to set, he asked me what I had learned. Jordan moved to the next chair. I told him I had learned that fighting with fists doesn't solve problems. He smiled and said, That's right, Michael. But there's something else. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay calm and speak the truth. Several men around the table nodded slowly. My grandfather died when I was in college, but his words stayed with me. When coaches told me I wasn't good enough, I remembered his voice. When people said I was just a dumb athlete, I heard his wisdom. Jordan returned to his place at the head of the table. Now let me tell you about my college teammates. Marcus Washington became a heart surgeon. He saves children's lives every day. Tony Rodriguez became a lawyer who helps poor families keep their homes. James Miller started a company that gives jobs to 200 people. The men around the table were listening carefully now. Some took notes on their papers. All of them played basketball. All of them were told to just play ball and not worry about thinking. But they didn't listen. They studied. They learned. They became leaders in their communities. Jordan looked directly at Pemberton. And let me tell you about other athletes you might know. Magic Johnson didn't just play basketball. He built movie theaters and restaurants in neighborhoods that needed them. He gave jobs to thousands of people. Jordan's voice got stronger. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar didn't just play basketball. He wrote books. He spoke about history and civil rights. He taught people about important things that happened in our country. He paused and looked around the room at every face. Arthur Ashe didn't just play tennis. He fought for equal rights. He started programs to help kids go to college. He made the world a better place. The room was so quiet it felt like being in a church. You see, Mr. Pemberton, when you look at athletes, you see entertainers. But I see something different. I see leaders. I see thinkers. I see people who inspire millions of children to dream big dreams. Jordan's hands were no longer shaking. His voice was steady and strong. We don't just play ball, sir. We play with heart. We play with mind. We play with purpose. Every time a kid sees us succeed, they learn that they can succeed too. He walked over to the window where Pemberton was standing. You said we should leave the thinking to people like you. But what if I told you that some of the best ideas I've ever heard came from athletes? What if I told you that the young man who taught me about computers was a football player? What if I told you that the woman who helped me understand business was a tennis player? Pemberton's face was getting redder. You want to know what I think the real problem is? Jordan asked. I think you're afraid that if people like me start using our voices, people might realize that we have something important to say. The room was electric with tension. Some men looked uncomfortable. Others seemed to be hearing these words for the first time. Jordan turned to face the entire room. I came here today to talk about helping kids. Kids who love basketball, but also want to learn and grow and become doctors and teachers in business. Leaders. Kids who shouldn't have to choose between playing sports and using their minds. His voice got even stronger. But now I see something bigger. I see a chance to change how people think about athletes. I see a chance to show the world that we're not just entertainers. We're role models. We're teachers. We're leaders. Jordan walked back to his chair and finally sat down. But he sat up straight, his shoulders back, his head high. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start a foundation. Not just for basketball, but for learning, for thinking, for showing the world that athletes can be anything they want to be. The room buzzed with whispers. Some men looked excited. Others looked worried. Jordan looked directly at Pemberton. And I'm going to do it whether you help me or not. Because my grandfather taught me that the strongest thing you can do is stay calm and speak the truth. He stood up again and put his hands on the table. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm going to create opportunities for young athletes to become leaders in business, education, and their communities. I'm going to prove that we can be more than just entertainers. The room exploded with voices. Some men started asking questions. Others began talking among themselves. A few pulled out their phones to make calls. But Jordan only watched Pemberton, who was still standing by the window with his mouth open. I'm asking each of you to join me, Jordan said, his voice rising above the noise. Not just with your money, but with your minds and your hearts. Help me show the world what athletes can really do. One by one, men around the table began to stand up. Richard Goldstein was first, then the man with the thick mustache, then the older man with white hair. Count me in, said Goldstein. Me too, said another. This is exactly what we need, said a third. But Pemberton just stood there, shaking his head. His face was red with anger. This is ridiculous, he said. You're all making a huge mistake. He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. Mark my words, he said, pointing at Jordan. This will never work. People don't want to see athletes thinking. They want to see them playing. He walked toward the door, then turned back. And when this fails, don't come crying to me. The door slammed behind him with a loud bang. The room was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. It was the quiet that comes after a storm, when the air is clean and fresh and full of possibility. Jordan looked around at the men who remained. They were all staring at him with something he had never seen before in their eyes. Respect. Well, said Goldstein, breaking the silence. I guess we have some work to do. The men around the table began to sit back down. But the room felt completely different now. The gold walls seemed brighter. The air felt lighter. Even the fancy chairs seemed more comfortable. Jordan looked at each face around the table. Where before he had seen doubt and coldness, now he saw something new. He saw curiosity. He saw excitement. He saw possibility. Michael, said the man with the thick mustache, I owe you an apology. My name is Frank Morrison. I've been thinking like Harold for too long. Frank's voice was shaky, like he was nervous about what he wanted to say. I played football in high school. I wasn't very good, but I loved it. My coach always told us that. Sports built character. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that lesson. He looked down at his hands. I started thinking that athletes were different from regular people. I started thinking they were just there to entertain me. I was wrong. Other men around the table began to nod. A few shifted in their chairs, looking uncomfortable but thoughtful. An older man with silver hair and kind eyes raised his hand slowly. "I'm Vincent Cooper," he said. "I own 3 basketball teams. And I'm ashamed to admit that I've thought exactly what Harold said tonight." Vincent's voice was soft but clear. "I've made millions of dollars from the hard work and talent of young men, mostly young black men. And I've told myself that I was doing them a favor by giving them a chance to play." He paused and looked directly at Jordan. "But I never asked them what they thought. I never asked them about their dreams beyond basketball. I just assumed they didn't have any." Vincent stood up slowly. He was an old man, probably in his 70s, but his voice was strong. "Michael, you've opened my eyes tonight. I want to help. Your foundation, not just with money, but with my teams. I want to create programs where my players can learn about business while they play." Jordan felt his heart beating faster. This was really happening. These men were really listening. "That's exactly what I was hoping for," Jordan said. "Young athletes need to know they have choices. They need to know they can be anything they want to be." A younger man with glasses and a nervous smile spoke up. "I'm David Chun. I run a computer company. I've always loved basketball, but I never thought about combining sports with technology." David's eyes lit up as he talked. "What if we created computer programs to help young athletes with their schoolwork? What if we taught them about technology while they trained for games?" "That's brilliant," said Jordan. "Technology is the future. Every kid should learn about it." Frank Morrison leaned forward in his chair. "I own several construction companies. We could teach young athletes about building and engineering. They could learn skills they could use for the rest of their lives. And I know lawyers and doctors who would love to help," added Vincent Cooper. "We could bring in professionals to teach and mentor these kids." The room was buzzing with energy now. Men who had been quiet all evening were starting to share ideas. They were talking about possibilities instead of problems. But Jordan noticed that not everyone looked happy. 3 men at the far end of the table sat with their arms crossed. They whispered to each other and shook their heads. One of them, a thin man with a sharp nose, finally spoke up. "This all sounds very nice," he said. His voice was cold and dismissive. "But let's be realistic here. How much is this going to cost? And what kind of return can we expect?" Jordan felt his stomach tighten. Here it was again. The same thinking that had gotten them into this mess. "It's not about return on investment," Jordan said calmly. "It's about return on humanity." The thin man laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Return on humanity? Michael, this is business. We're here to make money, not to save the world." Frank Morrison turned in his chair to face the thin man. "What's your name?" Frank asked. "Robert Sterling," the thin man replied. "And I think you're all getting carried away by pretty speeches." Frank's face got red. "You know what, Robert? I used to think exactly like you. And it made me a smaller person. It made me see people as dollar signs instead of human beings." Frank stood up, his voice getting stronger. "But tonight, Michael showed me something I had forgotten. He showed me that success isn't just about making money. It's about making a difference." Robert Sterling rolled his eyes. "That's very touching, Frank. But pretty words don't pay the bills." Vincent Cooper, the old man who owned the basketball teams, looked at Robert with sad eyes. "Son," Vincent said, "I'm 74 years old. I've made more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. And I can tell you something about paying bills." He paused and looked around the room. "The bills that matter most aren't the ones that come in the mail. They're the bills we owe to our community. They're the bills we owe to young people who need our help. They're the bills we owe to our own conscience." Robert Sterling gathered his papers and stood up. "I think I've heard enough for one evening," he said. "When you all come back to reality, you know where to find me." He walked toward the door, followed by the other 2 men who had been sitting with him. "Good riddance," Frank Morrison muttered. Under his breath, Jordan watched them leave and felt a mix of sadness and relief. Sadness because he knew there were many more people like Robert Sterling in the world. Relief because the men who stayed truly wanted to help. "Don't worry about them," said Vincent Cooper. "Some people take longer to change than others." Richard Goldstein, who had been quiet during the arguments, finally spoke up. "Michael, I want you to know something. When I invited you here tonight, I thought we were going to talk about a simple business deal. I thought we were going to figure out how to make money from a youth basketball league. He looked around the room at the remaining men. But you've given us something much more valuable. You've given us a chance to be part of something that really matters. David Chen nodded enthusiastically. I'm already thinking about the computer programs we could create. We could make learning fun and exciting for these kids. And I'm thinking about the construction projects they could work on, added Frank Morrison. They could build community centers and playgrounds for other kids. Jordan felt something warm growing in his chest. It was hope. It was excitement. It was the feeling that comes when you realize that your dreams might actually come true. But then he thought about Harold Pemberton and Robert Sterling. He thought about their angry faces and their cold words. He knew they wouldn't just disappear. He knew they would try to stop what he was trying to build. Gentlemen, Jordan said, I want you to understand something. This won't be easy. There are people who don't want us to succeed. There are people who want to keep things the way they've always been. He looked at each man in the room. But if we work together, if we stay focused on helping these young people, we can change the world. We can show everyone that athletes are more than just entertainers. We can prove that every person, no matter what color their skin is, deserves a chance to use their mind and follow their dreams. The men around the table began to applaud. It started slowly, with just Vincent Cooper clapping his hands. Then Frank Morrison joined in. Then David Chun. Soon, every man in the room was applauding. Jordan felt tears coming to his eyes, but he held them back. He thought about his grandfather Samuel, who had taught him to stay calm and speak the truth. He thought about his father, who had always told him to stand up for what was right. Most of all, he thought about all the young athletes who were out there right now, dreaming big dreams, but being told to just play ball. Thank you, Jordan said when the applause stopped. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And thank you for helping me turn this dream into reality. As the men began to gather their papers and prepare to leave, Jordan made a decision. That surprised even himself. He was going to do something that no one expected. Something that would change not just his own life, but the lives of thousands of young people. Something that would make Harold Pemberton very, very angry. Jordan walked to the front of the Golden Room. The remaining men were putting their papers in their briefcases and getting ready to leave. But something in Jordan's movement made them all stop and look up. Before you go, Jordan said, his voice calm but strong, I need to tell you something else. The men sat back down in their chairs. Vincent Cooper leaned forward with interest. Frank Morrison set down his briefcase. David Chen pulled out a pen, ready to take notes. Jordan took a deep breath. What he was about to say would change everything. I'm not just going to start a foundation, he said. I'm going to do something bigger. Something that will show the whole world what athletes can really accomplish. Richard Goldstein raised his eyebrows. What do you mean, Michael? Jordan walked over to the window where Pemberton had been standing earlier. Outside, the lights of Chicago twinkled like stars. Somewhere out there were thousands of young people with dreams and talents that nobody believed in. I'm going to put my own money into this foundation, Jordan said. Not just some of my money. Most of my money. The room went completely silent. Vincent Cooper's mouth fell open. Frank Morrison dropped his pen. Michael, Goldstein said carefully, that's a very generous offer. But you don't have to risk everything. Jordan turned back to face the room. Yes, I do, he said. Because if I don't believe in this enough to risk everything, how can I ask these young people to believe in themselves? He walked back to the center of the room. I've made millions of dollars playing basketball. I've bought cars and houses and expensive things. But none of that matters if I can't use my success to help others succeed too. David Chen looked worried. But Michael, what if the foundation doesn't work? What if you lose all your money? Jordan smiled for the first time all evening. Then I'll know I tried to do something that mattered. My grandfather Samuel didn't have any money, but he was the richest man I ever knew. Because he was rich in character and kindness. Frank Morrison shook his head in amazement. I've never heard of anyone doing something like this. You're talking about giving up your fortune to help kids you've never even met. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Jordan said. I'm going to create learning centers in 10 cities. Places where young athletes can train their bodies and their minds at the same time. He began to walk around the room again, but this time his steps were full of energy and excitement. We'll have classrooms right next to gymnasiums. We'll have computer labs next to basketball courts. We'll have libraries next to training rooms. Vincent Cooper was taking notes now. his old hands moving quickly across the paper. The kids will spend half their time learning sports and half their time learning everything else, Jordan continued. Math and science and reading and business. They'll graduate knowing they can be anything they want to be. How much money are we talking about? Asked Goldstein. Jordan paused. This was the part that would shock everyone. $50 million, he said quietly. The silence that followed was so complete you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. You could hear cars honking on the street far below. You could hear your own heartbeat. 50 million, Frank Morrison whispered. That's almost everything I have, Jordan said. But it's what these kids deserve. They deserve the best teachers, the best equipment, the best chance to succeed. David Chin stood up slowly. Michael, I want to match your donation. I'll put in $10 million for my computer company. Vincent Cooper stood up next. And I'll donate $5 million, plus I'll let kids from your centers train with my professional teams. Frank Morrison was the third to stand. Count me in for $3 million. And my construction workers will build your centers for free. Jordan felt his eyes getting wet. These men were willing to risk their own money because they believed in his dream. Thank you, he said. All of you. But there's something else you need to know. He walked back to the window and looked out at the city lights. Harold Pemberton isn't going to like this. He's going to try to stop us. He has a lot of power in this city, and he has friends who think like he does. Jordan turned back to face the room. He's going to spread rumors about us. He's going to try to convince people that our foundation is a waste of money. He's going to do everything he can to make us fail. Vincent Cooper's kind eyes became hard and determined. Let him try, the old man said. I've been in business for 50 years. I know how to fight bullies. Frank Morrison nodded. And I know how to build things that last. We'll build these centers so strong that nothing Pemberton does can tear them down. David Chin smiled. And I know how to use technology to spread the truth. We'll make sure everyone knows about the good work we're doing. Jordan felt a warmth spreading through his chest. These men weren't just offering money. They were offering friendship. They were offering to stand with him against whatever storms were coming. There's one more thing, Jordan said. I want to name the first center after my grandfather Samuel. The Samuel Jordan Learning Center for Young Athletes. That's perfect, said Goldstein. He would be proud of you. As the men gathered their things to leave, they were different than when they had arrived. They walked taller. They smiled more. They looked like people who had found something worth fighting for. Vincent Cooper was the last to leave. He walked slowly over to Jordan and put a hand on his shoulder. Son, he said, I've made a lot of money in my life. I've built companies and bought teams and collected fancy things. But tonight, you've given me something I never had before. What's that? Jordan asked. A chance to be a hero, Vincent said. A chance to be remembered for something that really matters. After everyone left, Jordan stood alone in the golden room. The silence was peaceful now, not scary like it had been earlier. He thought about calling his wife to tell her what had happened. He thought about calling his mother to share the news. But first, he wanted to stand here and think about what he had just done. He had just promised to give away most of his fortune. He had just committed to a fight against powerful people who wanted to keep things the way they were. He had just put his reputation and his future on the line for kids he had never met. His father had always told him, Son, a man is only as good as his word. When you make a promise, you keep it, no matter what. Jordan had just made the biggest promise of his life. He walked out of the Palmer Club and into the Chicago night. He looked up at the stars. Somewhere in those stars, he felt like his grandfather Samuel was smiling down at him. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Tomorrow, he would start building something that would change the world. But tonight, Harold Pemberton was probably making plans of his own. Plans to destroy everything Jordan was trying to build. Jordan knew that the biggest fight of his life was just beginning. And for the first time since he had retired from basketball, he felt ready for the challenge. 6 months had passed since that night in the Golden Room. Jordan stood in front of a beautiful new building in Chicago's South Side. Above the doors, golden letters spelled out, Samuel Jordan Learning Center for Young Athletes. The morning sun made the letters shine like his grandfather's smile. Jordan touched the wall of the building and felt the rough brick under his fingers. This was real. This was happening. It's beautiful, isn't it? Jordan turned to see Frank Morrison walking up the sidewalk. Frank's construction company had built the center in record time. Every brick had been placed with care. Every window had been cleaned until it sparkled. It's perfect, Jordan said. Samuel would have loved it. Through the windows, they could see young people inside. Some were shooting baskets in the gymnasium. Others were reading books in the library. A few were working on computers in the technology lab. How many kids do we have now? Frank asked. 47 in Chicago, Jordan answered. 23 in Detroit. 31 in Atlanta. 18 in Dallas. And 15 in our newest center in Los Angeles. Frank whistled. That's over 100 kids in just 6 months. Jordan smiled. 134, to be exact. And every single one of them is special. They walked through the front doors together. The lobby was filled with pictures of young athletes studying and playing. In one photo, a girl named Maria Santos dribbled a soccer ball while reading a book. In another, a boy named David Kim swam laps while reciting math problems. Mr. Jordan, a voice called from across the lobby. A tall teenager with bright eyes came running over. His name was Jamal Washington, and he had been one of the first students to join the program. Jamal, Jordan said, giving him a big hug. How are your classes going? Great, Jamal said, his face glowing with excitement. I just finished my business project. I wrote a plan for opening a community center in my neighborhood. Jordan felt his heart swell with pride. That's fantastic. What gave you the idea? You did, Jamal said simply. You showed me that athletes can be business leaders too. I want to help kids in my neighborhood the same way you helped me. Frank Morrison looked amazed. 6 months ago, this young man was just playing basketball. Now he's writing business plans. I was always smart, Jamal said with a grin. I just needed someone to believe in me. As they walked through the center, Jordan saw miracle after miracle. In the computer lab, Maria Santos was designing a website for her future medical practice. She wanted to become a doctor and help children in poor communities. Maria, Jordan called. How's your soccer training going? Maria looked up from her computer with a huge smile. Amazing. But you know what's even better? I got accepted to take college science classes while I'm still in high school. That's incredible, Jordan said. You're going to be an amazing doctor someday. I'm going to be a doctor who also coaches soccer, Maria said. Just like you taught us. We don't have to. Choose just one thing. In the basketball court, David Kim was practicing free throws between study sessions. He had already started his own small business selling computer programs to other students. David, Frank called. How's business? David grinned and sank another. Free throw. I made $200 last month. And I'm saving it all for college. What do you want to study in college? Jordan asked. Engineering and business, David said. I want to build things that help people, like Mr. Morrison does. Frank Morrison's eyes got a little wet. These kids are amazing, Michael. You were right about everything. But as they toured the center, Jordan noticed something that worried him. A few parents stood outside, talking in worried whispers. Some looked angry. Others looked scared. Jordan walked outside to talk to them. Is everything okay? He asked. A woman named Mrs. Thompson stepped forward. She was Jamal's mother, and she usually had a bright smile. Today, she looked upset. Mr. Jordan, she said quietly, some people have been saying bad things about your centers. They're trying to scare parents. What kind of things? Jordan asked, though he had a feeling he already knew. They're saying you're wasting money, said another parent. They're saying the kids should just focus on sports and not worry about school. Mrs. Thompson nodded. And they're saying worse things too. Things about, well, about race. Jordan felt his stomach tighten. He had been expecting this, but it still hurt to hear. Who's saying these things? Frank Morrison asked, walking up behind them. We don't know for sure, Mrs. Thompson said. But the rumors started after some rich man gave an interview on television. He said these centers were a waste of money and that athletes should stick to what they know. Jordan and Frank looked at each other. They both knew who the rich man was. Harold Pemberton. Mrs. Thompson, Jordan said gently. Has Jamal said anything about quitting the program? Mrs. Thompson laughed for the first time that day. Are you kidding? That boy loves this place more than anything. He talks about his business classes all day long. Then don't worry about the rumors, Jordan said. People who don't understand what we're doing will always try to tear it down. But the kids know the truth. Their success will speak louder than any words. Over the next few weeks, the rumors got worse. Some newspapers wrote mean articles about the centers. A few radio shows made jokes about athletes trying to be smart. Some sponsors started to pull their money. Jordan sat in his office one evening, reading the latest newspaper article. The headline said, "Jordan's Folly: Why Athletes Should Stick to Sports." The article was full of lies and half-truths. It said the centers were failing. It said the kids weren't learning anything. It said Jordan was wasting money that could be better spent somewhere else. But the worst part was the quote at the end. A quote from Harold Pemberton. "I tried to warn them," Pemberton had told the reporter. "Athletes are entertainers, not educators. This whole experiment is doomed to fail, and it's taking good money down with it." Jordan crumpled up the newspaper and threw it in the trash. He thought about his grandfather Samuel, who had faced discrimination his whole life, but never gave up. That he thought about the kids in his centers, who were proving every day that they could be anything they wanted to be. Most of all, he thought about the promise he had made in the Golden Room 6 months ago. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. "Hello," he answered. "Michael, it's Vincent Cooper. Have you seen the news?" Jordan's heart sank. "What news?" 3 more sponsors just pulled out. And there's talk that the city might try to shut down the Chicago Center. Jordan felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. Everything he had worked for was falling apart. "Vincent," he said slowly, "I need to ask you something. Do you still believe in what we're doing?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Michael," Vincent said, "I believe in it more than ever. Those kids are amazing. What they're accomplishing is incredible. Then we keep fighting," Jordan said. "No matter what." "Agreed," Vincent said. "But Michael, there's something else. Something that might change everything." "What is it?" "I got a phone call today. Someone wants to meet with you. Someone who has information about Harold Pemberton that could end all of this." Jordan felt his heart start beating faster. "What kind of information?" "The kind that could destroy Pemberton's reputation forever," Vincent said. "The question is, do you want to fight fire with fire?" Jordan stared out his office window at the lights of the city. Somewhere out there, Pemberton was probably celebrating the trouble he was causing. Somewhere else, kids like Jamal and Maria and David were studying and dreaming and proving that they could be more than anyone expected. The biggest decision of Jordan's life was waiting for him on the other end of a phone call. 2 days later, Jordan sat in a small coffee shop on the north side of Chicago. The place was nothing like the fancy Palmer Club. The chairs were old and comfortable. The walls were covered with pictures of regular people, not expensive art. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air. He was waiting for someone named Sarah Chun. Vincent Cooper had arranged the meeting, but he wouldn't say much about who she was or what she wanted. "She's a reporter," Vincent had said. "A good one. She's been investigating Harold Pemberton for months." Jordan sipped his coffee and watched people walk by on the sidewalk outside. Mothers pushed baby strollers. Old men read newspapers on park benches. Kids played basketball in a court across the street. These were the people he was fighting for. These were the people Pemberton thought didn't matter. "Excuse me, are you Michael Jordan?" Jordan looked up to see a woman with short black hair and intelligent eyes. She carried a laptop bag and looked like someone who asked a lot of questions. "Yes," Jordan said, standing up to shake her hand. "You must be Sarah Chun." Sarah sat down across from him and opened her laptop. "Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. Jordan. I know this must be a difficult time." "It is," Jordan admitted. "But we're not giving up." Sarah smiled. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Mr. Jordan, I've been investigating Harold Pemberton for 8 months. What I found could end his career and stop his attacks on your foundation." Jordan felt his heart beating faster. "What did you find?" Sarah opened a thick folder filled with papers and photographs. "Pemberton's companies have been breaking laws for years. They've been paying workers unfairly, especially workers of color. They've been unsafe workplaces that have hurt people. And they've been lying to the government about their business practices." She spread the papers across the table. Jordan could see financial records, safety reports, and legal documents. "This is enough evidence to send him to prison," Sarah continued. "His companies could be shut down. His reputation would be destroyed forever." Jordan stared at the papers. Here was the answer to all his problems. Here was a way to stop Pemberton and save his foundation, but something in his stomach felt wrong. "Why are you showing this to me?" Jordan asked. "Why don't you just write the story?" Sarah leaned back in her chair. "Because I wanted to give you the choice. You could use this information to fight back against Pemberton. You could prove to the world that he's not the moral authority he pretends to be." Jordan picked up one of the photographs. It showed workers in one of Pemberton's factories. They looked tired and unhappy. Some had bandages on their hands. These people were hurt in his factories. Jordan asked. Yes, Sarah said. And when they tried to complain, they were fired. Jordan felt anger rising in his chest. Pemberton was hurting real people while pretending to care about moral values. What would happen if this story came out? Jordan asked. Pemberton would probably lose everything, Sarah said. His companies, his money, his influence. He wouldn't be able to hurt your foundation anymore. Jordan stared at the papers for a long time. This could solve all his problems. This could save the centers and help the kids. But then he heard his father's voice in his head. Son, how you win matters more than winning itself. Jordan thought about his grandfather Samuel, who had always chosen the harder path because it was the right path. He thought about the kids in his centers. What would they think if they knew he had won by destroying someone else? Ms. Chun, Jordan said slowly, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think Pemberton is a bad person, or do you think he's a person who has done bad things? Sarah looked surprised by the question. I'm not sure I understand the difference. Jordan gathered the papers into a neat pile. I think there's a big difference. Bad people can't change, but people who have done bad things can learn to do better. Mr. Jordan, Sarah said carefully, this man has been attacking you and your foundation. He's been spreading lies and trying to destroy everything you've built. Don't you want to fight back? Jordan stood up and walked to the window. Across the street, kids were still playing basketball. They were laughing and having fun, not worrying about adult problems. I do want to fight back, Jordan said. But I want to fight the right way. He turned back to Sarah. My grandfather once told me that the strongest thing you can do is stay calm and speak the truth. He didn't say anything about destroying your enemies. Sarah closed her laptop. So you don't want me to publish this story? I didn't say that, Jordan said, sitting back down. I think this story should be published. These workers deserve justice. The truth should come out. But I'm not going to use it as a weapon against Pemberton. I'm going to do something else. Sarah leaned forward with interest. What? Jordan took a deep breath. What he was about to say would surprise everyone, including himself. I'm going to call Harold Pemberton. I'm going to ask him to meet with me, not to threaten him, but to try to understand him. Sarah's mouth fell open. You want to meet with the man who's trying to destroy you? Yes, Jordan said. Because maybe, just maybe, I can help him see that what he's doing is wrong. Mr. Jordan, Sarah said gently, that's very noble. But what if he doesn't listen? What if he just keeps attacking you? Jordan picked up the photograph of the injured workers again. Then at least I'll know I tried to do the right thing. And you can publish your story knowing that I gave him a chance to make things right first. Sarah gathered her papers and put them back in the folder. I've never met anyone like you, Mr. Jordan. Most people would have jumped at the chance to destroy their enemy. Pemberton isn't my enemy, Jordan said. He's just a man who's forgotten how to see other people as human beings. Maybe I can help him remember. That evening, Jordan sat in his office staring at the phone. He had Sarah Chin's folder locked in his desk drawer. He had the power to destroy Harold Pemberton with one phone call. Instead, he was about to make a very different kind of call. He picked up the phone and dialed Pemberton's office number. Pemberton Industries, how may I help you? This is Michael Jordan. I'd like to speak with Mr. Pemberton, please. There was a long pause. One moment, please. After what felt like forever, a familiar voice came on the line. Well, Harold, Pemberton said. Michael Jordan, calling to surrender. Jordan took a deep breath. I'm calling to ask if you'd like to meet for coffee. I think we should talk. There was silence on the other end of the line. Talk about what? Pemberton finally asked. About why you're so afraid of what I'm trying to do, Jordan said calmly. And about why you think attacking kids who want to learn is the right thing to do. Another long silence. You have a lot of nerve calling me, Pemberton said. Yes, I do, Jordan agreed. Because I think underneath all your anger, you're not as different from me as you think you are. Where? Pemberton asked after another pause. There's a small coffee shop called Murphy's on Lincoln Street. Tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Fine, Pemberton said. But don't expect me to change my mind about anything. I won't, Jordan said. I'm just hoping you'll listen. After he hung up the phone, Jordan sat back in his chair. Tomorrow, he would come face to face with the man who was trying to destroy everything he had built. He could have destroyed Pemberton. Instead, he could have used Sarah Chin's information to win the war, but his grandfather Samuel had taught him that real strength comes from trying to heal, not trying to hurt. Tomorrow would tell him if his grandfather was right. Jordan arrived at Murphy's coffee shop 15 minutes early. He chose a table in the back corner, away from the windows and other customers. This conversation needed to be private. The coffee shop was nothing fancy. The tables were old wood. The chairs had tape holding them together. But it felt honest and real, like the kind of place where people could speak the truth at exactly 3 o'clock. Harold Pemberton walked through the door. He looked around the simple coffee shop with disgust, like he had stepped in something dirty. His expensive suit looked out of place among the working-class customers. Pemberton spotted Jordan and walked over slowly. His face was hard and angry, but Jordan could see something else in his eyes, something that looked almost like fear. "Jordan," Pemberton said, sitting down across from him. "Harold," Jordan replied. "Thank you for coming. Let's get one thing straight," Pemberton said, leaning forward. "I'm here because I'm curious about what you think you can accomplish. But I'm not changing my mind about anything." Jordan nodded. "I understand. Can I buy you a coffee?" Pemberton looked around the shop again. "I suppose." Jordan got up and bought 2 cups of coffee from the counter. When he returned, Pemberton was checking his expensive watch and looking impatient. "Harold," Jordan began, "I want to ask you something, and I hope you'll give me an honest answer." "What? Why do you hate the idea of athletes using their minds so much?" Pemberton's face got red. "I don't hate anything. I just think people should know their place." "And what place is that?" "Athletes entertain. Business people think. It's always been that way." Jordan sipped his coffee slowly. "Tell me about when you were young. Did you play sports?" Pemberton looked surprised by the question. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Just curious." Pemberton was quiet for a moment. Then, to Jordan's surprise, he began to talk. "I played football in high school," he said quietly. "I wasn't very good. I spent most of my time on the bench watching better players get all the attention." "That must have been hard," Jordan said. "It was." Pemberton's voice got softer. "The athletes got the scholarships. They got the girls. They got everything, while kids like me had to work twice as hard just to be noticed." Jordan began to understand. "So you decided to work harder in business instead?" "Exactly. I studied. I worked. I built companies. I proved that smart beats strong every time. But now you see athletes being smart too, and it threatens everything." "You believe," Jordan said gently, that Pemberton's eyes flashed with anger. "You don't know anything about what I believe." "Then tell me," Jordan said. "Help me understand." Pemberton stared into his coffee cup for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "My father used to tell me that there were 2 kinds of people in the world. The ones who use their muscles and the ones who use their brains. He said I'd never be strong enough to use my muscles, so I'd better get smart fast." Jordan felt a sadness in his chest. "Your father told you that you weren't strong enough?" "Every day," Pemberton said. "He said I was weak. He said the only way I'd ever amount to anything was if I outsmarted everyone else." "That's a heavy burden for a kid to carry," Jordan said. Pemberton looked up with surprise. "You're supposed to be arguing with me, not feeling sorry for me." "I'm not feeling sorry for you," Jordan said. "I'm trying to understand you. Because I think your father was wrong about something important." "What's that?" "He taught you that people are either strong or smart. But that's not true. The best people are both. They use their muscles and their brains. They compete and they think." Pemberton shook his head. "That's easy for you to say. You were born with talent." "Harold," Jordan said, leaning forward, "can I tell you something that might surprise you?" "What?" "I was cut from my high school basketball team my sophomore year." Pemberton looked shocked. "You were?" "The coach said I wasn't good enough. He said I was too small and too slow. I went home and cried in my room for hours." "But you became the greatest player of all time." "Because I didn't let that coach's opinion become my truth," Jordan said. "I worked harder. I got stronger. I got smarter about the game. I proved that talent without work means nothing." Pemberton was quiet again, thinking. "The point is," Jordan continued, "your father's opinion doesn't have to be your truth either. You don't have to keep proving that you're better than athletes. You could help them succeed instead." "Why would I do that?" "Because deep down, I think you know it's the right thing to do." Pemberton's hands were shaking slightly around his coffee cup. "You don't understand. I've spent my whole life building walls between us and them. I've told myself that athletes are different, that they're less than me. If I admit I was wrong, then you admit you're human," Jordan finished. and humans make mistakes. But humans can also learn from those mistakes and do better. Tears began to form in Pemberton's eyes. I've said terrible things. I've hurt people. I've been just like my father. But you don't have to keep being like him, Jordan said softly. You can choose to be different. Pemberton put his head in his hands. For several minutes, he sat there crying quietly. Other customers in the coffee shop looked over with curiosity, but Jordan waved them away. Finally, Pemberton looked up. His eyes were red, but they looked different somehow. Softer, more human. Michael, he said, I owe you an apology. I owe a lot of people apologies. Apologies are a good start, Jordan said. But what really matters is what you do next. What do you mean? Jordan leaned back in his chair. I mean that sorry is just a word unless you back it up with actions. What kind of actions? Come to one of my centers. Meet the kids. See what they're really doing. See who they really are. Pemberton looked scared. I don't know if I can do that. Why not? Because if I see that you're right, if I see that these kids are as smart and talented as you say they are, then I have to admit that I've been wrong about everything. Harold, Jordan said, being wrong isn't the end of the world. Staying wrong is. They sat in silence for a few more minutes. Pemberton stared out the window at the street where kids were playing basketball. Those kids playing out there, he said finally. They remind me of myself when I was young. Except they look happy. They are happy, Jordan said, because someone believes in them. No one ever believed in me, Pemberton said sadly. I believe in you now, Jordan said. I believe you can change. I believe you can be better than your father was. Pemberton looked at Jordan with surprise. Why? After everything I've done to hurt you, why would you believe in me? Jordan smiled. Because my grandfather taught me that everyone deserves a chance to be their best self. Even people who have forgotten how to be good. Your grandfather sounds like a wise man. He was. And he would have liked you, Harold. He would have seen past your anger to the hurt little boy underneath. Pemberton wiped his eyes with a napkin. I don't know if I can undo all the damage I've caused. You can't undo it, Jordan said. But you can make sure it doesn't happen again. And you can work to make things better from now on. How? Jordan reached across the table and put his hand on Pemberton's shoulder. Come to the Samuel Jordan Learning Center tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Meet Maria Santos, who wants to be a doctor. Meet David Kim, who's already running his own business. Meet Jamal Washington, who's going to change his whole neighborhood. And then what? Then you decide for yourself whether these kids deserve your respect or your ridicule. Pemberton took a deep breath. And if I come, if I see what you want me to see, what happens then? Then you get to choose who you want to be for the rest of your life, Jordan said. You get to choose whether you want to be remembered as someone who tore people down or someone who helped lift them up. Pemberton stood up slowly. He looked older than when he had walked in, but also somehow lighter. 10 o'clock tomorrow, he said. 10 o'clock, Jordan agreed. As Pemberton walked toward the door, he turned back. Michael, yes, thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for not giving up on yourself. After Pemberton left, Jordan sat alone in the coffee shop for a long time. He thought about his grandfather Samuel, who had always believed that people could change if someone gave them a chance. Tomorrow would tell him if that belief was strong enough to heal a heart full of hurt and hate. But tonight, for the first time in months, Jordan felt hope. The next morning, Jordan arrived at the Samuel Jordan Learning Center early. He wanted everything to be perfect for Pemberton's visit. He walked through the halls, making sure the classrooms were clean and the students knew about their important visitor. Mr. Jordan, Maria Santos called out as she ran down the hallway. Is it true? Is the man who's been saying mean things about us really coming here today? Yes, Jordan said. But I want you to treat him with respect. Show him who you really are. Maria nodded seriously. I'll show him my medical textbooks. Maybe he'll understand that soccer players can be doctors too. In the computer lab, David Kim was working on a new program. Mr. Jordan, I finished the website for kids who want to start their own businesses. Should I show it to Mr. Pemberton? That's a great idea, David. Let him see how smart and creative you are. Jamal Washington was in the library, reading a book about community development. Mr. Jordan, I'm nervous. What if he still thinks we're just dumb athletes after he meets us? Jordan sat down next to Jamal. Then that's his problem, not yours. You know who you are. Don't let anyone else's opinion change that. At exactly 10 o'clock, Jordan stood by the front door waiting for Pemberton. 10:15 came and went. Then 10:30. Then 11 o'clock. Pemberton never showed up. At 11:30, Jordan's phone rang. It was Vincent Cooper, and he sounded upset. "Michael, have you seen the news this morning?" "No. I've been waiting for Pemberton. He was supposed to visit the center." "He's not coming," Vincent said grimly. "Turn on Channel 7. There's something you need to see." Jordan found a television in the teacher's lounge and turned to Channel 7. A reporter was standing in front of a courthouse downtown. "This morning, explosive allegations have surfaced against the Jordan Foundation," the reporter said. "A former employee claims that millions of dollars donated to help young athletes have mysteriously disappeared." Jordan felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. The reporter continued. "Marcus Phillips, who worked as an accountant for the foundation for 3 months, claims he discovered evidence of missing funds. Phillips alleges that foundation leaders have been using donation money for personal expenses." The screen showed a man Jordan barely recognized. Marcus Phillips had worked for the foundation briefly before being fired for showing up late and doing poor work. "I tried to tell them this was wrong," Phillips said into the camera. "But they told me to keep quiet. They said nobody would believe me because I was just a small-time accountant." Jordan's hands shook as he held the phone. "Vincent, this is all lies. Phillips was stealing money from us. That's why we fired him." "I know that, and you know that," Vincent said. "But the public doesn't know that. And there's more bad news." "What?" 3 major newspapers are running the story tomorrow. 2 television stations want to interview you tonight. And the city council is meeting this afternoon to discuss shutting down all your centers. Jordan sat down hard in a chair. Everything he had worked for was crashing down around him. "There's something else, Michael," Vincent said quietly. "The timing of this is very suspicious. Someone fed this story to the reporters. Someone wanted it to come out today." Jordan didn't need to ask who that someone was. He had been foolish to think Pemberton could change. While Jordan was trying to heal his enemy's heart, his enemy was planning to destroy him. Over the next few hours, the situation got worse. Jordan's phone rang constantly with reporters asking for comments. The center's parking lot filled with news trucks and cameras. Parents started arriving to pick up their children. Some looked angry. Others looked scared. All of them looked confused. Mrs. Thompson, Jamal's mother, found Jordan in his office. "Mr. Jordan," she said, tears in her eyes, "please tell me this isn't true. Please tell me you didn't steal money from these kids." "Mrs. Thompson, I swear to you on my grandfather's grave, I have never stolen a penny. This is all lies." Then, why is that man saying these things? Jordan didn't know how to answer without sounding like he was making excuses. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I promise you, I will find out the truth." By afternoon, half the students had been taken home by worried parents. The ones who remained looked scared and confused. Maria Santos found Jordan sitting alone in the empty gymnasium. "Mr. Jordan," she said, "my parents want me to quit the program." Jordan felt his heart breaking. "Do you want to quit, Maria?" "No," she said firmly. "This place changed my life. I was just a girl who played soccer. Now I'm going to be a doctor who plays soccer. I won't let lies destroy that." David Kim and Jamal Washington came into the gym together. "Mr. Jordan," David said, "we've been talking to the other kids. We don't believe these lies about you. But what if everyone else believes them?" Jamal asked. Jordan stood up and looked at these 3 amazing young people. They had trusted him with their dreams. He had promised to protect those dreams. Now everything was falling apart. "I don't know," Jordan said honestly. "But I know one thing. Even if the whole world turns against us, you 3 are proof that this program works. You're proof that athletes can be anything they want to be." That evening, Jordan sat in his office long after everyone had gone home. The building was empty and quiet. Photos of smiling students covered his desk, but they felt like ghosts now. His phone rang. It was Sarah Chun, the reporter who had offered him information about Pemberton. "Mr. Jordan, I'm calling about the allegations against your foundation. I suppose you want a statement," Jordan said tiredly. "Actually, I want to help. I've been investigating Marcus Phillips. He's been paid a lot of money recently by someone who wants to stay anonymous." Jordan felt a spark of anger. "Let me guess. Someone with the initials HB. I can't prove it yet, but the timing is very suspicious. Phillips was broke 3 weeks ago. Now he suddenly has enough money to hire an expensive lawyer. So what do I do?" Jordan asked. "Fight back," Sarah said. "Let me publish the story about Pemberton's illegal business practices. Show the world who's really the villain here. Jordan stared at the photos on his desk. Maria Santos studying medical books. David Kim programming computers. Jamal Washington reading about community development. His grandfather's voice whispered. In his memory. Son, how you win matters more than winning itself. No, Jordan said quietly. No, I won't fight dirty, even when my enemy does. If I use those tactics, I become just like him. But Mr. Jordan, your foundation could be destroyed. Those kids could lose everything. Jordan looked out his window. At the city lights. Somewhere out there, Harold Pemberton was probably celebrating. Somewhere else, 3 young people were going to bed worried about their futures. Ms. Chun, Jordan said, I'm going to fight back. But I'm going to fight with the truth, not with revenge. How? By proving that Marcus Phillips is lying. By showing the world what these kids can really do. By never giving up, no matter how dark things get. After he hung up the phone, Jordan walked through the empty center one more time. In the computer lab, David's projects were still saved on the computers. In the library, Maria's medical books sat open on a table. In the basketball court, Jamal's motivational quotes were written on a whiteboard. These kids believed in themselves because Jordan had believed in them first. Now it was time to prove that their belief was stronger than any lie. But as Jordan turned off the lights and locked the doors, he couldn't shake the feeling that his biggest test was still coming. The man who had seemed ready to change his heart had instead chosen to break Jordan's dream. Tomorrow, Jordan would have to find the strength to keep fighting, even though it felt like the whole world was against him. Tomorrow, he would have to prove that hope is stronger than hate, even when hate seems to be winning. Jordan didn't sleep much that night. He kept thinking about the look of fear in Mrs. Thompson's eyes. He kept hearing the doubt in the reporters' voices. Most of all, he kept remembering the trust in Maria's, David's, and Jamal's faces. At 6 in the morning, his phone rang. Michael, it's Frank Morrison. Have you seen the news? Jordan's heart sank. More bad news. Turn on Channel 7. Right now. Jordan fumbled for the remote and turned on his television. A reporter was standing in front of a microphone, but this time she wasn't talking about Jordan's foundation. In a shocking turn of events, the reporter said, Harold Pemberton III held a surprise press conference last night. What he revealed has stunned the business community and may change everything about the recent allegations against the Jordan Foundation. Jordan sat up straight in bed. The screen switched to a video of Harold Pemberton standing behind a podium. But he looked different than Jordan had ever seen him. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His usually perfect hair was messy. His eyes were red like he had been crying. Ladies and gentlemen, Pemberton said into the cameras, I have called this press conference to make a confession and to right a terrible wrong. Jordan's mouth fell open. For months, I have been spreading lies about Michael Jordan and his foundation. I have been working to destroy something beautiful because I was too proud and too scared to admit I was wrong. The reporters in the room began shouting questions, but Pemberton held up his hand for silence. Michael Jordan invited me to coffee yesterday. I thought he was going to threaten me or try to destroy me. Instead, he did something I never expected. He listened to me. He treated me like a human being. He showed me kindness I didn't deserve. Pemberton's voice began to shake. I was supposed to visit his learning center yesterday morning. But instead of going, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I arranged for false accusations to be made against his foundation. I paid Marcus Phillips to lie about missing money. The room erupted with gasps and shouts from reporters. There is no missing money, Pemberton continued. Michael Jordan has never stolen a penny. Every dollar donated to his foundation has gone exactly where it was supposed to go, to help young athletes become doctors and lawyers and business leaders and teachers. Jordan felt tears running down his face. I did this because I was jealous. I was angry. I was a man who had forgotten how to see the good in other people. But Michael Jordan saw good in me, even when I couldn't see it in myself. Pemberton looked directly into the camera. Michael, I know you're probably watching this. I want you to know that I am deeply, truly sorry. Not just for what I did yesterday, but for everything. For every lie I told. For every rumor I spread. For every time I tried to tear down something you were trying to build up. The reporter's voice came back on. Mr. Pemberton went on to announce that he is donating $50 million to the Jordan Foundation and calling for a full investigation into his own business practices. Jordan's phone was ringing again, but he ignored it. He was staring at the television in amazement. In addition, the reporter continued, Mr. Pemberton has resigned from all his company positions and says he wants to dedicate the rest of his life to making up for the harm he has caused. The story switched to interviews with people around the city. Parents who had pulled their children from the centers were saying they wanted them back. Business leaders who had criticized Jordan were now praising him. Politicians who had talked about shutting down the centers were now promising to support them. Jordan's phone rang again. This time it was Vincent Cooper. Michael, are you watching this? I can't believe it, Jordan said. Pemberton's press conference has been playing on every news channel for the past hour. The whole city is talking about it. Jordan got dressed quickly and drove to the Samuel Jordan Learning Center. When he arrived, he couldn't believe what he saw. The parking lot was full of cars. Families were walking toward the building carrying flowers and signs that said, "We believe in you, Mr. Jordan, and thank you for never giving up." Inside, the center was packed with people. Parents who had taken their children away were bringing them back. Students who had been scared were smiling again. Teachers and volunteers who had been worried were laughing and hugging each other. Mr. Jordan, Maria Santos came running up to him. Did you see the news? That man told the truth. He admitted. He was lying about you. David Kim was right behind her. My parents want to come back to the program. They said they're sorry they ever doubted you. Jamal Washington had the biggest smile Jordan had ever seen. Mr. Jordan, my mom cried when she saw the news. She said she knew all along that you were telling the truth. But the biggest surprise was waiting in Jordan's office. Harold Pemberton was sitting in a chair by the window. He looked older than he had just 2 days ago. His expensive suit was replaced by simple clothes. His arrogant expression was replaced by something Jordan had never seen before, humility. Harold, Jordan said softly. You came. I should have come yesterday, Pemberton said, standing up. I should have kept my promise to you. Why didn't you? Pemberton looked down at his hands. Because I was scared. Scared that if I saw how wrong I was, I'd have to change everything about myself. And now I realize that changing everything about myself is exactly what I need to do. Jordan sat down across from him. What you did last night, that took courage. It took desperation, Pemberton said. After I ordered those lies about you, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what you said in the coffee shop, about choosing who I want to be for the rest of my life. And who do you want to be? Pemberton looked out the window at the families celebrating in the parking lot. I want to be someone who builds things up instead of tearing them down. I want to be someone who helps kids achieve their dreams instead of telling them to give up. That's going to be hard work, Jordan said. Changing a lifetime of thinking isn't easy. I know, but I was hoping. Pemberton paused. I was hoping you might help me. Jordan looked at this man who had been his enemy just days ago. He thought about his grandfather Samuel, who had always believed that people could change if someone gave them a chance. What did you have in mind? Jordan asked. I want to work here, not as a boss or a leader, just as someone who wants to help. I want to learn from these kids the same way they're learning from you. Jordan felt his grandfather's spirit in the room, nodding with approval. Harold, Jordan said, I'd be honored to have your help. Over the next few hours, the center filled with more people than it had ever held. News cameras arrived to film the celebration. City officials came to apologize for doubting Jordan. Business leaders came to offer support and donations. But the most important moment came when Jordan gathered all the students together in the gymnasium. 6 months ago, Jordan told them, some people said that athletes should just play ball. They said you weren't smart enough to be doctors or lawyers or business leaders. The students listened quietly. Yesterday, those same people tried to destroy this place with lies. They tried to make you believe that your dreams weren't worth fighting for. Jordan looked around at all the young faces. But you didn't give up. You believed in yourselves even when other people didn't believe in you. You proved that you are more than just athletes. You proved that you are leaders and thinkers and dreamers. The students began to applaud. And today, Jordan continued, something amazing happened. The man who tried to hurt us realized he was wrong. He found the courage to tell the truth and ask for forgiveness. Jordan gestured to Harold Pemberton, who was standing nervously by the door. Mr. Pemberton wants to say something to all of you. Pemberton walked slowly to the center of the gymnasium. He looked at all the young faces staring at him. I owe all of you an apology, he said, his voice shaking. I said terrible things about athletes. I tried to destroy this place where you're learning and growing. I was wrong about everything." He paused and took a deep breath. "You have taught me something I never knew before. You've taught me that strength and intelligence aren't opposites. You've taught me that the color of someone's skin has nothing to do with what's in their heart or their mind." The gymnasium was completely quiet. "I want to spend the rest of my life making up for the harm I caused. I want to help you achieve your dreams. And I want to learn from you, because you understand something about character and forgiveness that I'm just beginning to discover." Maria Santos stood up first, then David Kim, then Jamal Washington. Soon, every student in the gymnasium was on their feet, applauding. As Jordan watched Harold Pemberton wiping tears from his eyes while young athletes cheered for him, he realized something amazing. This wasn't just a victory for his foundation. This wasn't just proof that athletes could be more than entertainers. This was proof that hearts could change. This was proof that enemies could become friends. This was proof that hope really was stronger than hate. His grandfather Samuel had been right all along. 5 years had passed since that night in the Golden Room. Jordan stood backstage at the Chicago Convention Center, adjusting his tie and looking out at the massive crowd. Today was the National Conference on Youth Education, and he had been invited to speak about his foundation's success. But he wasn't the only speaker today. "Mr. Jordan," a young woman with a clipboard approached him. "You're on in 5 minutes. Are you ready?" Jordan smiled. "As ready as I'll ever be. And Mr. Pemberton will introduce you, just like you requested." Jordan nodded. Harold Pemberton introducing him would have been impossible to imagine 5 years ago. But a lot of impossible things had become possible since then. Jordan walked to the edge of the stage and looked out at the audience. The convention center was packed with educators, business leaders, politicians, and parents from all over the country. Everyone wanted to hear about the program that had changed everything, but they didn't know the whole story yet. They didn't know the secret that Jordan and Pemberton had kept for 5 years. Today, that secret would finally be revealed. Harold Pemberton walked onto the stage, and the audience applauded politely. He looked completely different from the angry man who had stormed out of the Palmer Club years ago. His hair was grayer, but his eyes were kind. His expensive suits had been replaced by simple clothes. Most importantly, his cold smile had been replaced by genuine warmth. "Ladies and gentlemen," Pemberton began, "5 years ago, I was a very different man. I was a man filled with anger and prejudice. I was a man who believed that some people were better than others because of the color of their skin or the size of their bank account." The audience listened carefully. "I stood in a room full of wealthy investors and said something terrible. I said that black athletes should just play ball and leave the thinking to people like me." Some people in the audience gasped. Others shook their heads with disgust. But one man in that room didn't just get angry at my words. He didn't just argue with me or try to prove me wrong. He did something much more powerful. He showed me who I could become if I chose to change. Pemberton's voice got stronger. "That man is Michael Jordan. And he didn't just change my mind that night. He saved my soul." The audience began to applaud, but Pemberton held up his hand. "But there's something you don't know. Something that Michael and I have never told anyone. Something that shows just how powerful one moment of courage can be." Jordan felt his heart beating faster. They had planned this moment for months, but he was still nervous about sharing their secret. Michael Jordan didn't just start a foundation that night. Pemberton continued. He planted a seed that would grow into something bigger than anyone could have imagined. Pemberton turned to gesture toward Jordan. "Please welcome the man who taught me that leadership isn't about keeping people down. It's about lifting them up. Michael Jordan." Jordan walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. The audience was on their feet, clapping and cheering. But Jordan's eyes found specific faces in the crowd. There was Maria Santos, now Dr. Maria Santos, who ran free medical clinics in 3 cities while still coaching youth soccer. There was David Kim, who had started 4 successful technology companies and employed over 500 people. There was Jamal Washington, who had become a school principal and turned around 6 failing schools in Chicago. And scattered throughout the audience were hundreds of other young adults who had come through the foundation's programs. Doctors, lawyers, teachers, business leaders, community organizers, all of them proving every day that athletes could be anything they wanted to be. "Thank you," Jordan said when the applause died down. "Harold is right. I did plant a seed that night 5 years ago, but I had no idea how big that seed would grow. Jordan walked to the center of the stage. When Harold and I first met, we were enemies. He saw me as an entertainer who should stay in my place. I saw him as a symbol of everything that was wrong with the world. But something amazing happened when we chose to talk to each other instead of talking about each other. We discovered that we were both human beings with fears and dreams and the capacity to change. Jordan paused and looked at Pemberton, who was standing at the side of the stage. Harold, would you join me up here? It's time to tell them our secret. Pemberton walked over to stand beside Jordan. The two men who had once been bitter enemies now looked like old friends. The secret, Jordan said, is that Harold's transformation didn't end with his apology. It didn't end with his donation to our foundation. It began with something much bigger. The audience leaned forward, eager to hear what was coming next. Harold, Jordan said, tell them what you've been doing for the past 3 years. Pemberton stepped up to the microphone. He looked nervous, but determined. For the past 3 years, he said, I have been secretly funding scholarship programs for minority students in 12 states. I have been working quietly with universities to create opportunities for young people who have been told they aren't smart enough or good enough. The audience murmured with surprise. I have been visiting the schools and communities that my old attitudes helped damage. I have been listening to people I once ignored. I have been learning from people I once looked down upon. Pemberton's voice got stronger. I have been using my wealth and my connections not to build walls between people, but to tear those walls down. The audience began to applaud, but Pemberton wasn't finished. And today, I want to make an announcement that Michael doesn't even know about yet. Jordan looked surprised. This wasn't part of their plan. I am donating my entire remaining fortune, over $200 million, to create a national network of athlete education centers. Centers that will be run by Michael Jordan and staffed by people who understand that every young person deserves a chance to reach their potential. The audience erupted in cheers. Jordan felt tears in his eyes as he hugged his former enemy, now one of his closest friends. When the noise died down, Jordan took the microphone again. But that's still not the biggest secret, he said. The audience grew quiet again. The biggest secret is what this story really teaches us. It teaches us that one moment of courage can change everything, not just for one person, but for thousands of people. Jordan looked out at all the faces in the audience. That night in the Palmer Club, I could have stayed quiet when Harold said those hurtful words. I could have walked away and let his prejudice go unchallenged. But I chose to stand up. I chose to speak. I chose to plant a seed of change. Jordan gestured to the hundreds of young adults in the audience. That seed grew into this foundation, which has now helped over 10,000 young athletes pursue their dreams. It grew into Harold's scholarship programs, which have sent over 3,000 minority students to college. But most importantly, it grew into something that can't be measured in numbers. It grew into proof that people can change. It grew into proof that enemies can become friends. It grew into proof that one moment of courage can create ripples that spread across the entire world. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. You see, the secret isn't just about what happened to Harold and me. The secret is about what can happen when any of you choose courage over fear, love over hate, hope over despair. Jordan's voice got stronger. Every single person in this audience has the power to plant a seed of change. Every single person here can choose to stand up when they see something wrong. Every single person here can be the one who refuses to let prejudice and hate go unchallenged. The audience began to rise to their feet again. So here's my challenge to you, Jordan said. Don't wait for someone else to plant the seed. Don't wait for someone else to stand up. Don't wait for someone else to speak the truth. Be the seed. Be the voice. Be the change. The convention center exploded with applause that lasted for 10 minutes. People were crying, hugging each other, and promising to do better. But the most beautiful moment came when Harold Pemberton stepped back up to the microphone. Michael Jordan didn't just change my mind that night 5 years ago, he said. He changed my heart. He showed me that the most powerful thing anyone can do is see the humanity in another person, even when that person has forgotten their own humanity. Pemberton looked directly at Jordan. He taught me that true strength doesn't come from putting people down. It comes from lifting them up. True leadership doesn't come from building walls. It comes from building bridges. And most importantly, He taught me that it's never too late to become the person you were meant to be. As Jordan and Pemberton walked off the stage together, Jordan thought about his grandfather Samuel. He thought about that night in the Golden Room when he had almost stayed silent. He thought about the choice he had made to stand up and speak. Truth to power. That choice had changed Harold Pemberton's life. It had changed the lives of thousands of young athletes. It had changed Jordan's own life in ways he never could have imagined. But the most amazing part was that the story wasn't over. Every day, new seeds were being planted. Every day, new people were choosing courage over fear. Every day, the ripples of that one moment of bravery were spreading a little farther. As Jordan looked out at the audience still applauding, he realized that the greatest victory of his life hadn't happened on a basketball court. It had happened in the moment he chose to believe that people could change, and that victory would keep growing for the rest of his life. 10 years had passed since that life-changing night in the Golden Room. Jordan stood in the newest Samuel Jordan Learning Center in Detroit, watching young athletes work on computers while their basketballs sat nearby. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, making everything glow with golden light. "Mr. Jordan?" A small voice called from behind him. Jordan turned to see a 7-year-old girl with pigtails and bright eyes. Her name was Destiny Williams, and she was the daughter of one of the center's basketball coaches. "Yes, Destiny. My daddy says you used to be famous for playing basketball, but now you're famous for something bigger." "What's bigger than basketball?" Jordan smiled and knelt down to her level. "What do you think is bigger than basketball, Destiny?" She thought for a moment, her face serious. "Helping people believe in themselves." "That's exactly right," Jordan said. "You're very smart. My daddy says I can be anything I want to be. A doctor, a teacher, a basketball player, or all three." Jordan felt his heart warm. "Your daddy is absolutely right. You can be anything you dream of being." As Destiny skipped away, Jordan looked around the Detroit Center. It was the 15th location in what had become the largest athlete education program in the world. Each center was full of young people who were proving every day that they could excel both in sports and in academics. "Michael," a familiar voice called from across the room. Jordan turned to see Harold Pemberton walking toward him. At 79 years old, Harold moved a little slower than he used to, but his eyes were bright with purpose. He spent his days visiting the centers, mentoring young people, and telling his story of transformation to anyone who would listen. "How are the new students adjusting?" Harold asked. "Beautifully," Jordan replied. "We have 43 kids enrolled here now. The youngest is 8, the oldest is 17, and every single one of them believes they can change the world." Harold smiled. "Because you taught them that believing in yourself is the first step to achieving anything." They walked together through the center's hallways, past photos of graduates who had become doctors, lawyers, teachers, business owners, and community leaders. Some photos showed students in graduation gowns. Others showed them in hospital scrubs, or business suits, or standing in front of schools they had built in their neighborhoods. "Michael," Harold said as they stopped in front of a wall covered with thank you letters, "do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stood up that night?" Jordan had thought about this many times over the years. "I think about it often. All these kids, all these dreams, all these changed lives. None of it would have happened if I had chosen to stay silent. And I would still be a bitter old man spreading hate instead of love," Harold added quietly. They entered the center's library, where a group of teenage athletes were studying for their college entrance exams. In one corner, a football player was reading a medical textbook. At another table, a soccer player was working on calculus problems. Near the window, a basketball player was writing an essay about starting a nonprofit organization. "Mr. Jordan," called out Marcus Thompson, a 16-year-old who played football and wanted to become a veterinarian. "I got my SAT scores back. I scored high enough to get into any college I want." "That's fantastic, Marcus," Jordan said, giving him a high five. "Which colleges are you considering?" "I want to go somewhere that is both a great football program and a great science program. Because you taught us we don't have to choose between our talents and our dreams." Jordan felt tears forming in his eyes. He had heard similar stories thousands of times over the past 10 years, but they never stopped moving him. In the computer lab, Maria Santos was teaching a programming class to a group of young athletes. She was now 32 years old and had become one of the most respected pediatric surgeons in the country. but she still made time to coach soccer and teach at the centers. Dr. Santos, one of her students asked, "How do you find time to be a doctor and a teacher and a coach?" Maria smiled. "Because Mr. Jordan taught me that when you love what you do, you find a way to do it all. He showed me that I didn't have to choose between being an athlete and being a doctor. I could be both." In the business classroom, David Kim was leading a workshop on entrepreneurship. At 28, he had already started 6 successful companies and was worth over $50 million. But his proudest accomplishment was the scholarship fund he had created for young athletes who wanted to study technology. "Remember," David was telling his students, "every great business starts with a simple idea and the courage to pursue it." Mr. Jordan had the courage to believe that athletes could be more than just entertainers. That courage changed all our lives. Down the hall, Jamal Washington was meeting with a group of students who wanted to become teachers and principals. At 30, Jamal had already turned around 8 failing schools and was considered one of the most innovative educators in the country. The secret to changing a school, Jamal was explaining, is the same secret Mr. Jordan used to change our lives. You have to believe in people even when they don't believe in themselves. You have to see their potential even when they can't see it. As Jordan listened to his former students teaching the next generation, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The seed he had planted that night in the Palmer Club had grown into a mighty tree with branches reaching all over the world. But the most amazing part was what happened next that a young man Jordan didn't recognize approached him in the hallway. He was probably in his early 20s, tall and athletic, with intelligent eyes and a warm smile. "Excuse me, Mr. Jordan? My name is Samuel Pemberton." Jordan's eyes widened. "Samuel Pemberton?" "Yes, sir. I'm Harold Pemberton's grandson." "I was named after your grandfather, Samuel." Jordan felt his heart stop. He looked across the room at Harold, who was watching with tears in his eyes. "My grandfather Harold has told me the story of how you changed his life," Samuel continued. "He's told me how you chose to see the good in him even when he couldn't see it in himself." "Your grandfather is a remarkable man," Jordan said. "He is now," Samuel agreed. "But he says he wasn't always. He says you taught him how to be better." Samuel paused and took a deep breath. "Mr. Jordan, I'm graduating from college next month with degrees in education and social work. And I want to ask you something." "What's that?" "I want to work here. I want to help carry on what you and my grandfather started. I want to help young athletes believe in themselves the way you helped my grandfather believe in himself." Jordan felt like his grandfather Samuel was standing right there with him, smiling down from heaven. "I would be honored to have you join our team," Jordan said. As the day ended and the students went home, Jordan stood alone in the center's main hallway. The walls were covered with photos and awards and thank you letters from thousands of young people whose lives had been changed. But what moved him most was a simple handwritten note that hung in a frame near the entrance. It was from Destiny Williams, the 7-year-old girl with pigtails. "Dear Mr. Jordan, my daddy says you prove that athletes can be anything they want to be. When I grow up, I want to be like you. Not because you were a great basketball player, but because you help people believe in their dreams. Love, Destiny." Jordan touched the frame gently. This little girl had never seen him play basketball, but she understood something much more important. She understood that his greatest achievement wasn't any trophy or championship. It was the courage he had shown to stand up for what was right, even when it was scary. Harold Pemberton walked up beside him. "Michael," Harold said softly, "I want to thank you again." "For what?" "For seeing the man I could become instead of just the man I was. For giving me a chance to be better. For showing me that it's never too late to change." Jordan put his arm around his old friend's shoulder. "Harold, you did the changing. I just believed it was possible. And that belief changed everything." They stood together in comfortable silence, looking at all the evidence of lives transformed and dreams fulfilled. "You know what the most amazing part is?" Jordan said finally. "What? This story isn't ending. It's just beginning. Every day, new young people walk through these doors. Every day, new seeds of change are planted. Every day, someone chooses courage over fear." Harold nodded. "And every day, your grandfather Samuel's wisdom spreads a little farther." As they walked out of the center together, Jordan looked up at the evening stars. Somewhere in those stars, he felt the presence of his grandfather Samuel, who had taught him that the strongest thing you can do is stay calm and speak the truth. That lesson had started with one moment of courage in a room full of powerful men who thought athletes should just play ball. It had grown into a movement that proved athletes could be doctors, teachers, business leaders, and agents of change. That IT had transformed enemies into friends and hate into love. But most importantly, it had shown the world that every person has the power to plant a seed of hope that can grow into something beautiful and lasting. As Jordan drove home that night, he passed a playground where kids were playing basketball under the lights. He stopped his car and watched them for a moment. One little boy made a great shot and started celebrating. But instead of just dancing about his basketball skills, he turned to his friends and said, "When I grow up, I'm going to be a basketball player and a scientist." Jordan smiled and drove on. The seed was still growing. The legacy was secure. And somewhere, another young person was discovering that they could be anything they dreamed of being. Michael Jordan had learned the most important lesson of his life. True greatness isn't measured by what you achieve for yourself. It's measured by what you inspire others to achieve. And that inspiration would continue growing, one dream at a time, for generations to come. His grandfather Samuel would have been proud. Sometimes the most important moments in our lives happen not when we're performing on stage, but when we're standing up for what's right in a room where everyone expects us to stay quiet. Michael Jordan's greatest victory didn't happen on a basketball court. It happened in the moment he chose courage over comfort, truth over silence, and hope over hate. That choice didn't just change Harold Pemberton's heart. It didn't just create a foundation that helped thousands of young athletes. It proved something powerful and eternal. One moment of courage can change the world, and you have the power to create that moment. You have the power to plant the seed. You have the power to be the change, just like Michael Jordan discovered that night in the Golden Room. Your greatest achievement might not be what you accomplish for yourself. It might be what you inspire others to accomplish. The next time you see something wrong, remember this story. Remember that speaking up might be scary, but staying silent might be scarier. Remember that the strongest thing you can do is stay calm and speak the truth. Remember that every person deserves to be seen as a whole human being with dreams and potential. And remember that you are more than what people expect you to be. You are a leader. You are a thinker. You are a dreamer. Don't let anyone tell you to just play ball. Play with your whole heart, your whole mind, and your whole soul. The world is waiting for your moment of courage. This story shows us that one moment of courage can change everything. Michael Jordan could have stayed quiet that night, but he chose to stand up for what was right. His bravery didn't just defend athletes. It transformed hearts and changed thousands of lives. That we all have moments like this. Moments when we can choose courage over silence. Moments when we can plant seeds of kindness that grow into something beautiful. Where are you listening from today? Drop a comment and let us know your city or country. We love hearing from our amazing listeners around the world. That if this story inspired you to believe in the power of standing up for what's right, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. When you subscribe, you help us spread more stories of hope, courage, and kindness to people who need to hear them. Click on the video appearing on your screen right now for another incredible story that will touch your heart and remind you that every person has the power to make a difference. Remember, you are more than what people expect you to be. You are a leader, a thinker, and a dreamer. Don't let anyone tell you to just play ball. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.